Hello, 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 good people. Welcome to episode 2 of Righteous, Ratchet, and Real. We are so excited to be in your car, in your living room, on your computer, wherever you're listening to this podcast. We're just excited and happy that you've joined us today. We are continuing our conversation on protecting your peace, but we're going to focus today on protecting your peace at work. And so I'm your co-host for today, Dr. Greta, and I'm going to let the ladies give you their names so you can hear their voice and see their face. Keisha.
I'm Dr. Takesha.
And I'm Dr. Renee.
Yay. And so we are continuing our discussion today. So, as you know, protecting your peace is so important for mental health, for even our physical health, because we know that when we carry stress in our bodies, that is not a good thing. It comes out in heart disease, comes out as cancer. And so keeping our peace, keeping our stress levels low is so important. And it's so much harder to do, I think, and this is just my opinion, I think it's so much harder for us to do it as Black women because we have so much on our plates these days. And the pandemic, of course, has not done anything to help with that. So, if we're working from home, if we're doing Zoom meetings, of course, that's all been compounded. Zoom fatigue is real. Come on, y'all. I know you know what I'm talking about. Even down to and achievement anxiety, being Black and on the job, you feel like you have to work harder than most. And of course, you're working against those stereotypes. So it's so much. And of course, for us, your host today, myself and Takesha and Dr. Renee, Dr. The doctors, all of us are doctors. Let me just say that and get that out the way. So for us, work is also church. And so not only is it protecting our peace at work, but for us, it's protecting our peace at church, which is work for us. So I just want to give you this statistic. The Mental Health Foundation reports that 51%, more than half, of adults who feel stressed also report feeling depressed. That's a lot of people, y'all. To be stressed out and depressed. And we know mental health is real. Whether we've done a good job at it or not, mental health is very real. And so these are statistics and numbers that we cannot ignore. We can no longer continue to ignore our health issues. And I could throw a bunch of statistics out there about health, but we know Black people rate high in all the categories across the board. So this is something we really have to be careful with, something we have to pay attention to. Protecting our peace is real. Am I right, sisters?
You right about it.
You right.
So, as you know, here at Righteous, Ratchet, and Real, we like to look and examine these topics through the lens of being righteous, ratchet, and real. And so, theologically speaking, the text that we have today comes to us from Luke chapter 10, verses 38 through 42. It's one of my favorite. Y'all know about those sisters, Mary and Martha. Come on, Mary and Martha. So the text says, as they went on their way, he being Jesus, entered a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister named Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks, so she came to him and asked, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her to get up and help me. Now, I ad lib that. But it says, tell her then to help me. But the Lord answered her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her. Oh my God, this is such, to me, a theological gem for preaching because there's so much in here. And I'm just going to start by asking, and I'm going off script, y'all. I'm just going to start by asking, what do you think that better part is? Jesus says Mary has chosen the better part.
Mm.
What is that better part that you believe that Mary chose that Martha was negating, neglecting, overlooking? What do you think that was?
So I think, the most obvious thing is creating space
Mm,
to actually listen to God. And, I think oftentimes we can negate what that looks like because we can become so busy doing church work,
mm,
doing, working, moving and movement. And even when we talk about serving in God's household, whether, it's like us as paid or even just as, the person who's ushering and
mhm,
greeting the ministry, because usually that person who shows up for one ministry shows
mhm.
up for a bunch of
Yeah.
different ministries. And so that is work in and of itself. And I think we have to talk about that even when it comes to our regular jobs that may be paychecks that are outside of the churches, that we can sometimes become so busy chasing after the coin, chasing
Mhm,
after the promotion, that we do not take
mhm,
enough time to replenish, because this is really, our podcast is still Christian based, right? And so we
mhm,
believe that our time spent with God is replenishing,
mhm,
hearing from God, even hearing from God what you need to take off your plate.
mhm,
Because in this
mhm.
moment, I feel like God said, you can take that off your plate right now
Right.
and just sit and be with me, because this is going to replenish you so that you won't
Mhm.
feel bitter and angry about having to go make the food and serve
Mm,
people. And so for me, I think that that's one of the things that this is telling us, even in the text, is to make sure that we're spending enough time relaxing in God,
yeah.
hearing from God, that we know what we need to be engaging in and what we don't need to be engaging in. Because oftentimes we feel overworked and we feel overwhelmed because we're in
Mhm,
places we don't even need to be. And so they're
mhm.
no longer bringing us peace and joy. And
Right.
that's where we're really upset and what we're angry about. And we may project that onto other people, acting
Mhm.
like they're the person because, they get to go rest and we got to work. But hey, God's saying, she chose the better thing. You can choose it
Right.
too. You have free range to do that.
I love what you said. You can choose it too, right? And that's the thing. We can choose to have that rest, but and I would say, that's one thing that we have really not done well is rest. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Well, we ain't doing a lot of remembering.
Mm-hmm.
so,
Mm-hmm.
so and I know, Sabbath rest is real. Sabbath rest is needed. The word sabbatical exists, right? Dr. Renee, talk to us about Sabbath rest and taking sabbatical, and how important that is.
So I'll tell you about that in a second. I just wanted to echo that, we are human beings, not human doings,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Come
So,
on.
so the better part is being. We're principally called to just be.
Mm-hmm.
That's our purpose in life, is to be, right?
Mm.
Before we do anything else, we are to be. So that's the better part, just simply being. And the work is going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be there. It's always going to be there. There's always going to be
Yes.
something that needs to be done. Always,
Right.
always, always. We will never not have a job or something
Mm-hmm.
to do. So the better part is simply, yes, like Keisha said, just simply just being there, being present. But I think showing up as yourself
Mm.
all the time
Mm.
is, that's what we're called to do and to be. So,
Mm.
but with regard to sabbaticals are amazing. And I used to think that it was something that only academics did, or only churches that were not Black, because I'd never heard of a Black church pastor taking a sabbatical until mine took a sabbatical. So my pastor took a sabbatical in 2017, I believe it was. And I am the executive minister. So he named me the administrative or the acting pastor during his time of sabbatical. And he had about 4 months off. And so he set the stage
Mhm.
for that. Our church, he prepared our church for it. He let
Mhm.
people know, okay, you're going to be reporting to her over, this period of time, and gave me some instruction on how to do things, and, all of the finer details of pastoring he gave me. So I was able to lead during that time. But then flash forward in
Mhm.
2022, well, actually in 21, I had done so much work navigating our church into the pandemic,
Mhm.
because we went from, of course, being in person to virtual. individual. And there was so much work involved. Our church had suffered a number of losses. I had done so many graveside uh,
Mm.
services,
Mm.
just I was overwhelmed.
Mm.
And I talked to my pastor and the board of directors and I said, listen, I just need some time because
Okay.
my mental health is suffering. I
Mhm.
feel like I am not able to be present because I'm not present for myself.
Mhm.
I need some time off. So we negotiated a sabbatical for me that lasted 2 months. Now, you might not think 2 months is a long time, but baby, a whole lot of living done in 2 months of not having to go to work.
All right.
So we planned it out. I was able to give some of my responsibilities over to the other
Mm.
on staff and to other volunteers, and we're able to negotiate it. So I went on sabbatical May 1st and
Mhm.
was back the first week in July, and that thing was life. I mean,
Mm.
it was
That
life.
life.
Mm.
Yes. And I so appreciate my members. Our members were fabulous because they did not call me. They did not text me. They did not email me. There were lots of opportunities for them to, call me and do all those things because things were happening while I was gone. But they said, no, no, we're going to honor the boundary. And I
Amen.
it's just so important that you not only honor your own boundaries when you when it comes to time off and having sabbatical, um, but that the people would agree to honor that boundary too.
Right.
So even before I had sabbatical, I was careful about having Sabbath. And I know all three of us observe a Sabbath
Yeah.
because we typically have to preach or we have to work on Sundays. We
Yeah.
designate another day during the week
Right.
where we can just rest and simply be, right?
Mhm.
Take care of ourselves, take care of our own needs, our own mental health, and create that bubble around ourselves to do what we need to refresh our spirits. So that is so incredibly important in a world as busy as ours. We just got to do it.
Absolutely. I heard you say a couple of things. The first thing you said was rest, and I might be paraphrasing a little bit, but you said rest allows us to show up as ourselves.
Mhm.
And I take that statement and I think about Martha, how she was in that space. She was probably overworked, of course,
Mhm.
feeling alone, right?
Hmm.
But just not herself to come out and Lord tell her to get her behind up and come help me. She see me in here struggling. And we that but we see that a lot in our churches because one of the other things you named is that, and it may have been Keisha, but the person who shows up as the usher is also part of the choir. She's part of hospitality. She's
Yes.
part of the Sunday school team. So,
Mhm.
we know that we wear and work within a lot of ministries in the church that, and just to be honest, I mean, we're overworked, we're overtaxed, we're over uh is it exhilarate or overwork ourselves, whatever that word is. But yeah, but rest allows us to show up as ourselves and
Mhm.
and gives us life. That was the other thing you said, Renee. It brought so much life into you. And so we have to kind of keep that in mind. Rest allows us to rejuvenate, restore, heal, even. And so it's hard to show up and be our best self when we have not rested, right?
Mhm. That's
And,
right.
and even I think about, times I was really tired, as a young mom. And I remember my mom said to me one time, I don't know what she heard or what I said, but she said, Greta, you have to make sure you take time for you.
Hmm. Mhm.
And I took that to heart. That's why, like I said, on the Tuesday, you can find me in the movie theater. But yeah, we have to take time for ourselves so that we can rest and restore and rejuvenate so that we show up as our best self. And
Mhm.
then the other thing one of you mentioned was to name the need. Name your need for rest, right? And a lot of times we don't do that. We just continue to say yes. We continue to add to our plate. We continue. And then we're wondering why our back aches. We're wondering why we're having headaches all the time. And it's because we're not the Energizer Bunny.
Mhm.
We cannot keep going and going and going.
Right.
And so we have to take time to have that rest.
Let me jump in there real quick, Greta,
Go
because
ahead.
we also modeling that thing. So doing that models that for other people. When
Yes,
we take the time to rest, when we're intentional about it, it also sets
that's
other
true.
people up to say, you know what, let me see what that's about. Let me go ahead and think about doing that for myself. We model it to the people that we serve. We
Mm-hmm.
model it to our bosses when we have them. We model
Mm-hmm.
it to, to our families, to our
Yeah.
children
Right.
even. So it's important that we do it not just for ourselves, but we're creating a great witness to other
Yes.
people, right? Of following the command that Jesus gave, that we rest, or the example rather that Jesus gave us. And even in this passage,
Mm-hmm.
that Jesus is telling, that there's always going to be work.
Mm-hmm.
Choose the better thing.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Keisha,
Right.
you want to add anything to that?
I do not have anything else I want to, add at this point, but
Mm-hmm.
we can start to talk about the ratchet, y'all.
Before we hit that ratchet, because
Mhm.
I love the ratchet part. But anyway, before we hit
We
that
live for
though,
the ratchet, y'all. We live for the ratchet.
Yeah, we do.
I love that part. But there's, some people have said, well, first of all, let me name this. In Mary resting and not being in the kitchen, so to speak, or doing other chores around the house, Mary was basically saying, "No." She was saying no. And it's
Mhm.
so important that we that we learn the art of saying no.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. My
Mhm.
husband, he calls me the queen of yes, but he also says I know how to say no in a very uh good way. I'll put it good way. Because I don't just say no, I ain't doing it. But I guess experience has taught me to say no in a way that lets you know it's okay. Everything, life will not fall apart, that I'm not doing this or that I won't be there, right? But
Mhm.
we have to learn how to say no, and especially as women in ministry, because
Mhm.
the jobs are many, the responsibilities are many. And so, but we have to learn to say no. Do you all find that you struggle with saying no sometimes?
That is my struggle.
Okay.
Like, I feel guilty. Like, I just
Mhm.
be like, who's going to do it if I don't do it? Like, and so then, I have moments where I'm better than other moments of
Mhm.
just, like there have been moments in my life where I felt the pressure on me so much that I didn't feel like myself. I didn't feel well enough. I was, I was definitely Martha. I was angry. And I was, like I recognized that I was angry. And I just had to, one of the things that I said to someone who I was mentoring at that point in ministry, I said to her, and it was me speaking to myself, but also to her because she was in the same spot where we were the ones stepping up and answering questions.
Mhm.
And so I told her, I said, sometimes we just have to let balls drop. Like
Mhm.
that is literally what,
Mhm.
and I think that that's what the fear is, that if we let the ball drop, what will happen? And I
Right.
believe that there are moments where God allows balls to drop so
Mhm.
that someone else steps up, because I've had experiences in ministry where people will tell you, they're like, "Oh, I didn't know you needed help. I asked for help. What you mean you ain't know I needed help?" Like, but you made it look like you were doing it with such ease
Mhm.
that they
Mhm.
felt like they could sit back and watch. And
Mhm.
so sometimes I believe
Mhm.
that we'd have to allow balls to drop, and then
Mhm.
other people can then, step up. But at more
Mhm.
importantly, allowing the balls to drop, or even just releasing it to be like, this is not the season to have this or do this, is
Mhm. Yeah.
about you recognizing that you are not well and
Mhm.
choosing your wellness over what needs
Mhm.
to be done.
Yeah.
So I do struggle with it, but
Mhm.
I have enough wisdom now at this point to recognize the signs of me being overworked, and then
Mhm.
to say to someone, I can't do this, or not put the pressure on myself to make it happen because it needs to be done. So there's
Mhm.
sometimes an email needs to go out, but I just have so much mental pressure from my home life or whatever that
Mhm.
that email may not go out when it needs to go out. And I'm just going
Right.
to just say,
Right.
I apologize, didn't happen, but
Mhm.
wasn't there, wasn't able to. So, it's a consistent struggle with me to check in. And I know we talked about that before, that checking in with self
Mhm.
to see where
Mhm.
you are enough to be able to be aware when you're getting to the point where you're Martha angry and you really need
Mm.
to be Mary sitting down.
Right. And I'll say too, and I think this might be true for all of us. You can tell me if I'm wrong. We do things, and this is not braggadocious by any way, but I think that for the three of us, we try to approach whatever we do with a level of excellence, right?
Mhm.
Absolutely.
And so I think for me, if there are areas, because it's not that I know all about saying no. There are some times I struggle, but I've found that the times that I've struggled the most are when my perfectionist tendencies kick in.
Mm.
Mhm. Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I,
And
I know
so,
Rondé is trying to say something, and I'm going to
come
just
on, Renee.
tap in for 1 second to
Go ahead.
just say to that point.
Yeah.
One
Mhm.
of the rules that I've learned in doing ministry and work and business and all of those things is a simple rule that if someone is able to do it 80%
Mm.
as great as you would do it, go
Okay.
ahead and hand it off. And so
Oh, how
that
do
Mhm.
I'm
wait?
no
I love
longer
that.
expecting my 100%. But
Yeah.
I
I
got
was, you
you.
got
Got to repeat
80%,
that.
girl. You get
Repeat that again. Repeat that again. Say that again. Roll that back.
I have learned in it that, I don't have to hold on to everything because of my perfectionism wants it to be 100% how I envision it, how I want it to be. That a rule of thumb is if someone else can do it 80% as good as I can, let me go ahead and hand it off to them to do it so that it's off my plate.
Mhm.
And I now have one less thing that I have to worry about. It may not be the perfection that I wanted it to be, but it's
Mhm.
good enough to pass, right? It's good
Yeah.
enough. I'm getting to be on it still.
You have saved so many lives
Right.
with that one statement,
That was
Dr.
it.
Keisha. That's a
That's it.
mic drop.
Sheesh.
Mic drop. Oh, you saved my life on that one. Okay,
Yeah. That's good.
that was
I
good.
learned I learned from a member a while ago. She was a volunteer on one of my teams. And it was a season when we were generating ideas. We were in a couple of different meetings and we were brainstorming. And someone brought a wonderful idea to the table. And now I'm the person, I'm the leader in the room. And they are all bringing ideas to what do you think? What do you think? And so it was an awesome idea. But
Mhm.
my dear volunteer said, well, hold on. And who will do that?
Mm. Mhm.
And I looked at her and I was like,
Mhm.
yeah, who's going to do that? Because she was acknowledging that I had enough on my plate, that there was already, I had
Mm.
a full to do, right? And anything else was going to cause me to be out of balance. So she
Right.
gave me that language. And who will do that? To push back
Mm.
and say, that's an awesome idea. I love
Mhm.
it. And who's going to do it? Right?
Mhm.
I'm writing that one down too.
Yeah, that one. And that has gone with me. Shout out to Pat Butler. Miss Pat, thank you so much for that language, ma'am, because that has helped me navigate some tough stuff. Like I want to do it all. And I want to do it all, just like we have named, that we are all perfectionists in our own way, one way or another. And I want to do it all. I want to serve the needs of my congregation. I want to,
Mhm.
have the folks have a good time doing it and all of that.
Right.
But I cannot do all of that. I
Right.
have a life.
Mhm. Mhm.
Thank you.
Yes.
So then my boundary has to show, I have to show up for
Mm.
the boundary. So,
Right.
and who will do that has saved me in more than a few moments.
We
Right.
are
My
saving
pastor says
lives
this.
up in the Righteous, Ratchet, and Real
I know that's right.
podcast.
Saving lives. My
Woo!
pastor does it this way, Rane. Because church members have really wonderful ideas of how church can be better,
Yes.
right? And so even I think, when we work in offices, there are people who have wonderful ideas of what you can do. And so that a model of saying, yeah, but who can do it? Even when we come to our regular JOBs, not just church,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
just saying, when we're in a meeting and people have wonderful ways of how we improve things, we have to recognize our own limits and say, but
Mhm.
who in our current staff has the ability to do that? Do we need to
Right.
bring somebody in? Do we need to, outsource
Mhm.
this to a different company? And so,
Mhm.
like when I was in corporate America, there was this one guy, I promise you, he just was lazy. And so the one thing that he would always say is, he would say, I'm learning how to work smarter, not harder.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so they would say, you need to find the laziest person in the room to tell you how to get things done, because they're going to make it the
Oh,
most
wow.
efficient way of how to
Oh,
get it
that's
done,
good.
right?
That's good.
Wow. Okay.
But my pastor does it this way. When church members come to him and they say we should do this or whatever, he says, I think that's a wonderful idea. Run with it. So it
Mm.
then
Mm.
turns the
Yeah.
onus right back on them. Like, if
Right.
you believe in this idea, go ahead and run with it. But it also allows them to no longer have the language to blame you
Ooh.
Mhm.
for not
Mhm.
having it executed,
Mhm.
because
Woo.
you have empowered them and then said, you have the idea, go forth. I
Mhm.
give you full permission and
Mhm.
autonomy to run with the ball.
Mhm.
And
Absolutely.
oftentimes the ball doesn't get run with.
Oh, well,
More often than not. Yes, I agree with that statement.
but they can't say that they were not heard and didn't
Mhm.
have the opportunity to execute. So,
Right. Yep.
that's yeah. Mhm.
Absolutely. This is good stuff, ladies. Yes. Yeah. And not only did you save other lives, you saved mine. Yes. 80%. Someone who can do 80% is still, oh, thank you, God. And who will do that?
Mhm.
Yes. Okay. All right. I got you. So yes, so in terms of this text and Mary and Martha, Martha choosing the better part in terms of finding that rest, that's a very real thing. We have to establish, as the ladies have said, we have to establish boundaries that allow us to do that. And so, yes, we know that the jobs are many, the responsibilities are many. We know that the Black church is overworked, overtaxed, ultimately killed. Come on, people, let's be real about that. We ain't at the real part, but this is a real thing. Pastors, excuse me, have worked themselves into an early grave.
Yeah.
And that's a very real thing. We cannot continue to add to our plate and add to our plate and not have some type of consequence for the plate that we can't carry. That's too
Mhm.
heavy. And so yeah. Um Keisha, you want to talk to us about even more ratchetness with this statement or with this topic?
Yes. So, although much of our conversation has been framed around being church workers, because
Mhm.
that is our current context, it is not the only context that I have. And so I just was even talking to my sister earlier, because she's looking at a new job. And so I have to give her the rundown of my history of working. And so she was like, wow, you were at your job for 13 years, right? So I got all the lessons, right? That was like my first job out of college, got all the lessons there.
Mhm.
And so going back to that whole idea of rest and pushing back against people, is that I think we have to remember that corporate structures are looking for maximum output. And that's all they
Mhm.
care about. They do not care about you as a person. And I think that that was one of the lessons that I learned in working, is that if I die today, if I
Mhm.
lose something today,
Yeah.
they are going to just put my job back on the market. They're going to
Mhm.
find somebody else to come in and replace me. And so it allowed me to create that boundary for myself, where I could be able to say, I'm going to choose me. I'm going to choose my family at all times above everything else. Like, I am never going to allow a job to box me into a place where I feel like I have to do what they need me to do to get the output they need. And instead, I'm harming myself or I'm harming my family. And
Mhm.
so, very specifically, in terms of a story, y'all, my former supervisor, bless her heart, was a bit of work. You hear me? A bit of
Mhm.
work. And she was honestly one of the things that made working in that particular environment hard, because she could be really nice, but she could also be really woo. You know, we all know the word that we oftentimes use when it comes to women in power.
Mhm.
And she literally oftentimes led into that part. I mean, from cussing people out when she wanted to or whatever. But
Mhm.
my boundaries were very clear and very defined with her, because I understood who she was and I understood who I was. And so
Mhm.
I had to define those characteristics so that when she was ready to pop, I was ready to pop back with her. I'm
Mhm.
like, and I always had that mindset, y'all. I don't know if it's because the youngness of me or whatever it was, but I always had the mindset, you can fire me if you want to. I'm just gonna find another job, but you're not
Mhm.
going to,
Mhm.
you know what I mean, make me put up with your stuff. And
Right.
that aspect, came into a meme that I saw recently, just and I sent it to the ladies, where the guy was like, when you have vacation and they trying to tell you no, and he's like on vacation living his best life, and dancing, because it's for me, I was always like, yo, if I have this vacation time, you're not going to tell me I'm going to show up to the job. No, that's
Mhm.
not how this is working. And so we came into a specific incident where we were celebrating my grandmother's probably 90th birthday at that point, right?
Mhm.
And so all my family made this big plan to take her on vacation to Florida. And we had this, planned out. I put it on the schedule, and another coworker who was also a manager at that point. Both of us were going to be out. And
Mhm.
so we went to the meeting, and, they're looking at the calendar and they see we're both going to be out. And so my supervisor goes, well, somebody's going to have to stay behind because two of you can't be out at the same time. And I looked at her and I was like, my other coworker, she was my homegirl, but she was definitely more quiet than I was. And I was like, I looked at her and I was like, well, I don't really know what you guys are going to do, but I'm taking this time off.
There
And
you go.
Be me.
right. I was like, I'm not really sure what you're going to do, but I have the time. I put it in, and I don't know how
Right.
to mix up, but at the end of the day, I'm taking this.
That's
And
right.
so you could see her seething. Like, she was mad, like big mad. And I was like, I really don't care, ma'am. Like, I'm literally in my professional, hands on the desk looking like, okay. And it just bothered her so much. But I
Mm.
think that that's part of what we need to just remember, is that you have to know who you are. Like, that's part of
Mhm.
protecting your peace at work, is to know who you are,
Mhm.
know your principles and your values, know what's important to you,
Mhm.
and do not allow corporate America to push back against who you are and your
Mhm.
values. Because I'm like, y'all, the other folk may not value family in the way that we value family.
Mhm.
Right.
I'll be darned if my granny don't make it to 91 and I missed her 90th birthday. So
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm messing around with you.
Nope.
No.
Mm-mm. That's
And,
good.
and I'll say, you said something about corporations. Their whole goal is maximum output.
Mm-hmm.
And I have two things for that. All right. So, and we can talk about it. So, on the one hand, yes, I see this a lot with Black men who are in corporate America, this whole achievement anxiety, um,
Mm.
because they're fighting and working against so many stereotypes about Black men. And
Mm-hmm.
usually, in some, really, the higher up, of course, they go, the fewer of them there are. And so, what are your thoughts on that, and how, and even Black women too? It's not just Black men, but I see it a lot with Black men, this anxiety of having to perform because they're trying to keep that job, they're trying to continue to put food on the table. um and so, any thoughts around that?
So I think that it's real. I don't know that I would distinguish it as particularly a male versus
Hmm.
female
Right.
thing, because we are all scratching and surviving good times, right? We are all trying to make it work. We're trying to make it do what it do.
Yeah.
So, so I think that phenomenon is very much a part of our illness, right? We
Mm.
don't pay attention to our wellness, we'll be forced to deal with our illness.
Hmm.
You know?
Hmm.
So I think that we need to pay more attention to what Takesha has already named, and
Mhm.
that is being very clear
Mm.
that this corporate lifestyle, this corporate stuff, is a means to an end.
Mhm.
That our life is about living it. That job is going, it's going to be there. It's going to go on. There will always be work.
Mhm.
You know?
Okay.
So I think understanding that at its root and the fact that we are called to more than just work and
Mhm.
bills. I
Mhm.
think one of the things that is helping me with that though is all of these little TikTok videos with these young people who are getting their very first job.
Yes.
Mhm.
They're getting their
These
pay
Gen
stub,
Zers.
and they're realizing they're looking at the number of hours that they've worked, and then they're looking at SSI, and then your
Mhm.
federal tax and your state tax that are being taken out, the
Right.
benefits, all this money being taken out, and the balance of your life is being reduced to a figure,
Mm.
to
Mhm.
being a dollar amount.
Mhm.
And that's not what we're truly called to. Our life is not supposed to be about dollars and cents.
Mm-hmm.
We are to make, I think it's healthy to make a good choice where you want to spend your day working. We all got to work and do something, but ensuring that you have the right employment situation in the first place. That's one.
Mhm.
And,
Okay.
and then secondly, understanding that that job is not the only facet of your life that needs attention. And
Mm.
again, it's all back to boundaries, right?
Mhm.
What is
Mhm.
it you want for your life? Knowing yourself, knowing what you want out of life,
Mhm.
and
Right.
allow that to be the driver
Mhm.
versus trying to make this rent, trying to make these grows, trying to make all of these things, and
Mhm.
then figuring out from there.
Okay.
Right. Also, the idea that we're never going to change anybody's trope. Like, we are not, I mean, that trope began while we were working in the fields picking
Mhm.
cotton that they didn't want to pick, that
Mhm.
they weren't paying us to do. Like,
Mhm.
so it doesn't matter how much I show up and try to outperform Brad and
Mm.
Kelly. At the end of the day, if that is what you think about me,
Mhm.
I can't do anything about it.
Mhm.
The
Come on.
only thing I can do is secure a place where somebody doesn't look at me in comparison with that trope.
Mhm.
Because if I'm trying to outperform your trope, I'm never going to do it. And I'm going to
Mm. Come
always find
on.
myself in a place of hurting myself so
Yeah.
that you can get what you need.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
Mhm. Mhm.
Wow. Wow. That's a word. We will never outperform their trope.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I think that really, yeah, I think that's it. I think that's it.
Yeah,
That's
that's
even for
Awesome.
women in ministry, right? Like,
Mhm.
we can preach the house
Mhm.
down, we can add to the church. And if
Mhm.
they believe that a man belongs in the church and in the pulpit, in the AME
That's
context, for
right. You're
example,
right.
what they will do is they will move you out of the church that you grew and put a man in there because
You ain't
I can
lying.
outperform your trope.
mm.
You ain't lying. That is so true. Because I was going to circle back around to that, the whole idea that you mentioned about maximum output and how that, especially in denominations that are hierarchical, so to speak. I ain't gonna call none out. But how does that affect, your placement, your appointment?
Mm.
Because I see that a lot in the church. I'm looking for maximum output. How many ascensions? How many conversions? How many? You know the rundown,
Mhm.
Dr. Geisha.
Right, that's
So
the AME life, y'all. That's that AME life. We
Good
we we
job.
got to report. We got to report
right.
to the bishop.
So it's like I see that corporateness
Mhm.
of what is your output? What have you done? And it's not we're not numbers, like you said, Dr. Renee. It's not all about we're not our numbers.
Mhm.
We're
Right.
not our salary. We're not these things, but we are so much more than that. So yeah, that's real ratchet. That's real ratchet to use the terminology. So want to transition a little bit. I want to talk about the realness of this because, yes, we're working, we have our salaries, we're hopefully tax paying folk, whatever the case may be. But at the same time, when you look at our checks, so to speak, especially in ministry, we ain't making a whole lot in ministry.
Come on,
Most of
talk
us
sense.
are not the mega
Oh,
pastors. We
We
don't have that check.
we
We don't
didn't see
have.
these
I
babies
can't
up
afford
here.
a phantom on my check.
We
I
are
don't think any of
not
us can.
right. So we're not making a lot. So I'm hearing this phrase a lot now: multiple streams of income.
mhm,
What are we doing
mhm.
to add to our salary base or our income so that we can pay the rent and we can
Yes.
get the groceries? I mean, inflation is real.
Mhm.
And so and do you think that trying to add multiple streams of income are hurting us? Thinking back to that Mary Martha text, is it hurting us or is it helping us? What are your thoughts on that?
Hmm. Well, I know that among us, there's this push for building and creating generational wealth,
Mm-hmm.
right? You hear that a lot too,
Yeah. Yeah.
along with the multiple streams of income. And there's a certain part of that that as pastors, as preachers and pastors, that absolutely makes sense for that
Mm-hmm.
to be something that we are teaching or preaching and living, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, though, scripturally, we're called to not worry about the fields, the flowers in the field don't worry about what tomorrow's going to be, right? That is
Mm-hmm.
what we're called to do and not be as worried about, you know, and then additionally, not storing up our treasures,
Mm-hmm.
here. So there's this balance, there's this fine balance because I want my babies to be taken care of. I want my children to have the best, of everything that I can give. And after I'm gone, for there to be a legacy,
Mm-hmm.
of financial stability for them
Right.
to move into, right? So they don't have to work as hard as me and my husband did
Mm-hmm.
in our
Right.
lives. So, and we want every generation to be that much better. So there's this fine line that we have to, I think, that we have to walk in terms of, yes, balancing the fact that our main, calling is to be, and
Mm-hmm.
then, yeah, we are to hustle, so our kids can flow a little bit, when they don't have to scratch as hard as we did.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really have the answer to that, but I acknowledge and name for myself that I've had to try to find the balance in there. I've got multiple streams, and I'm trying to looking at a couple more that I'm trying to build. But I also recognize that in doing so, I have to maintain, my own peace.
Mm-hmm.
I have to take care of myself, and live my life as best I can because my kids are watching me. My congregation's watching me still.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely. Keisha?
So, one thing that I do, and this is no way am I trying to come for my sis, but this is literally something I had to do because for me, I walked out of corporate,
Mm-hmm.
and my walking out of corporate and into just the culture of what it means to try to build your own things, hustle became such a word that was like, people wear it on their t-shirts, everybody is using
Mhm.
it. And that was one thing that I had to do. I let go of that language for myself.
Mm,
Like,
mhm.
I definitely prefer multiple streams of income because hustle just
Mm.
says it's in and of itself such a weighty word. And I felt like
Yeah.
walking with that just made me more anxious. It made me feel like, if I'm not on the computer 24/7 and I'm not like
Mm-hmm.
pursuing income 24/7, that somehow is being lazy. And so
Yeah.
I had to let go personally of that word and the heaviness of what it meant to hustle.
Mhm.
Now, I feel like, in terms of pursuing multiple streams of income, one of the things that I think we need to consider is the fact that, one, how do we create income that can automate itself? So,
Yeah.
like, for example, with Dr. Renee, the fact that she may record and it may take a month. Us doing this podcast, it may take several weeks of preparation, record, but building your other aspects of work or coinage, that it does not necessarily last throughout the whole year, that you can automate it as much as possible,
Right.
investing in stocks. Like, those are things that will work for you. Yes, you have to do the research on the front end. Yes, you may have to go back and review your portfolio, but ensuring when we're talking about adding streams, that we're adding things that do not
Taxing.
require us to be up 24/7. Like,
Right.
it's not like you adding on to your 8-hour workday and then now you got another, somehow 20 hours to fit in the 24 hours. Like, come on now.
Mhm.
It's not going to happen. And that's going to
Right.
tax us. So being smart about where we invest our time to add income, and having those things be things that are automated that we can
Yeah.
do, and it may take a maximum output at one point, but at the rest of it, it's just kind of working for itself. So
Mhm.
that's one aspect that I think that we have to hold there, in doing this process. And then also making those things about things that are passion projects, right?
Mhm.
And that we are passionate about the things that we're doing. And this is the other thing, y'all, is that everything does not even have to be about coins. Like, sometimes it's just
True.
about joy. Like, create your crafts
Right.
just for joy, like
Right.
just to
Right.
restore yourself, and
Mhm.
bring peace.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to always be about creating for work or to sell, but that we are doing those things that are bringing us back to
Right.
restoration. And part of that restoration process, even, is if we think about the fact that we've added three other streams of income, and that has taken away from our time, that we are creating within our schedule hard stops. Like that for me, because I know that I'm a worker, and so it's easier for me to be overworked than overrested, y'all. That's just not in my natural, inclination. And
Mhm.
so for me, it's silly to other people, but because I know myself well enough to know, I put in my schedule rest week. And so I,
Good.
I list out all the things I'll do to rest in my calendar, because I'm a calendar person. But if
Mhm.
I don't have those hard stops in there, then I can do other things. People can call me, work can call me, whatever they can do. But when I have those hard stops created within my schedule for myself, it allows me to ensure that I'm looking at my calendar and I'm finding my own balance, my own rest space. So that's, I think, one of the ways that we can naturally, counter set or counter the idea that we need to, add income. We need to do other things. Yes, we need to do it, but that's a practical way on how we ensure that we're finding the balance that we need.
Mhm.
Absolutely. This is awesome, ladies. A lot of takeaways, and before we end, I just want to name a couple of them. So of course, from Mary, we learned the necessity of saying no. We have to be okay with that and setting our boundaries. I'm hearing we have to schedule rest and commit to it, whether that's a 2 month sabbatical or whether that's a week built into our monthly schedule. We have to schedule rest and commit to it. And then in terms of the not hustle, because that is a weighty word, but in creating those multiple streams of income, my cousin likes to say, who is a, I was gonna call her a hustler, Lord, but she has a lot of streams of income. But she says, work today. She's working hard today so that she can play. And I'm going to add and rest tomorrow. So
Mhm.
she doesn't schedule a lot of rest, but still, the concept, the idea is there. There's some things we have to do today so that tomorrow we can enjoy it.
That's right.
And if we're broke down, beat down, sick, ill, whatever the case may be, that's going to hinder us from enjoying our tomorrow. So we pray that something was said during this podcast that blessed you. I know I was blessed with the 80, and then who will do that? So, but hopefully you all, our listeners were blessed. We hope you've enjoyed episode 2 of the Righteous, Ratchet, and Real podcast. And so tune in, make sure you subscribe to our podcast, make sure you check us out on social media, and we will see you next episode.